Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're delving into a topic that, well, it's absolutely central to human experience, yet it's often profoundly misunderstood, maybe even, vilified money.
hmm
You've definitely heard the saying, money is the root of all evil, right? It's practically etched into our cultural
Oh,
consciousness.
yeah. Everyone knows that one.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and it's a crucial insight from one of our sources today that's actually a pervasive misquote.
Is that right?
Yeah. The original biblical text, 1 Timothy 6.0, it actually says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil."
Ah, okay. The love of money.
Exactly. It's a subtle but honestly a profoundly important distinction. It immediately sets the stage for how we should view wealth and success.
That single word love, it just shifts the entire perspective, doesn't it? It immediately moves the focus from money itself, which, it's an inanimate tool, right?
Yeah.
A medium of exchange. It moves the focus to our relationship with it,
Yeah.
how we obsess over it, how we pursue it, how we use it, and, the potential pitfalls of worshiping it above everything else.
Right.
So this deep dive is exactly that,
Mhm.
a journey through remarkably different, often surprising perspectives on wealth, investment, and those larger, powerful economic forces that shape our world.
Absolutely. And we've pulled from an incredibly fascinating stack of sources today. I mean, we're talking about direct insights from financial advice titans like Dave Ramsey,
My big name.
legendary investors like Peter Lynch and Warren Buffett, and even the incisive economic analyses of Richard Wolff and Ray Dalio. Plus, we've got sharp observations from Jordan Peterson, Whitney Webb, and, of course, Charlie Munger.
That's quite a lineup, a really diverse group.
It really is. It offers this multifaceted view that will challenge assumptions and hopefully offer you, the listener, fresh, actionable insights.
So our mission today is to unpack these sources meticulously, extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, and help you understand not just what these experts are saying, but why it matters for your own financial understanding and, crucially, your future.
Yeah. Get ready for some genuinely surprising facts, some significant shifts in perspective maybe, and definitely some practical wisdom you can actually apply to your life.
Okay, let's dive in.
Okay, let's unpack this right away by challenging our fundamental perception of what it even means to be rich. We hear a great deal about wealth inequality, which is, without question, a real and important conversation. But have you ever truly considered your own financial standing on a global scale? It might genuinely shock you.
Indeed. One of our sources reveals some truly eye-opening statistics that fundamentally challenge our perception of wealth, especially for those of us living in the Western world. For example, the average American household income. It currently hovers around $50,000 annually.
Okay, seems about right for an average.
Right. But what most people don't realize, however, is that this seemingly modest average income places you squarely in the top 1% of income earners worldwide.
Wait, worldwide, top 1% for $50,000.
Worldwide. Think about that for a moment.
That's incredible. I mean, many of us in America wouldn't even consider $50,000 a year as rich by any stretch of the imagination. It's certainly not living the high life in most major cities.
No, not at all. And it gets even more surprising. Our sources state that if you make just $34,000 a year,
Right.
you are still categorized as being in the top 1% globally.
Wow.
And if your income is a mere $11,000 annually, which remarkably falls below the federal poverty line here in the U.S., you are still, by global standards, in the top 14% of income earners across the entire planet.
So basically, almost everyone listening in the U.S. is, relatively speaking, incredibly wealthy.
By global measures, yes.
Yeah.
The vast majority of households in places like the U.S. are incredibly wealthy compared to the rest of the world.
So if that's the undeniable truth, why don't most of us feel rich? I mean, I certainly don't wake up every morning thinking I'm in the global 1%. What's going on psychologically here?
Well, this is a truly critical point, and it speaks to human nature, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The reason is largely due to our inherent tendency to compare ourselves, not to the broader global context, but to those immediately around us, our neighbors, our colleagues, what we see portrayed in media, or perhaps even what we perceive on social media.
Right. The comparison trap.
Exactly. This constant internal comparison creates what one source provocatively describes as a dangerous socioeconomic psychographic trend. If we're perpetually comparing ourselves to those who outwardly appear to have more, or maybe who are in the top 1% within our own nation, we inevitably never feel adequate.
Yeah, you always feel like you're falling short.
Right. This leads to a pervasive sense of not being rich enough, regardless of how much we actually have relative to the rest of the world.
And this sense of inadequacy, as our sources highlight, leads directly to an even bigger danger, the vilification of success itself. If money is, by extension of that misquote we started with, seen as inherently evil, then people who accumulate money, successful people, are then perceived as inherently bad or evil.
Precisely. And this trend can be incredibly damaging to society and to individual ambition, because if success is vilified, it subtly discourages others from pursuing it.
Why bother, right?
Why would you strive for something that will label you as inherently bad or make you a target of resentment? It's a logical progression that's not hard to follow, yet it permeates our culture. This also creates a profound hypocrisy in the marketplace, as our sources point out, where the very people who loudly preach against wealth and financial success are often quite wealthy themselves. It leads to this stark inconsistency in their public message and their private reality.
That's a really interesting point, and it brings us to a foundational argument presented in our sources about why North America, particularly the United States, has achieved such profound financial success. One source boldly puts it as the largest group of financially successful people of this size in the history of humankind.
Wow, that's a big claim.
It is. And it attributes this remarkable success, surprisingly, to an underlying Judeo-Christian ethic.
Okay, explain that. How does that work if someone isn't religious?
Well, the argument suggests that, regardless of one's personal faith or beliefs, the cultural operating system of the U.S. is deeply rooted in this ethic. It proposes that certain core values, derived from this tradition, have fostered an environment uniquely conducive to prosperity and innovation. So it's not about religious adherence necessarily, but about the societal principles that have taken root.
Got it. So what are these core values in action that the sources highlight?
They point to two key principles: integrity and service.
Integrity, first and foremost, is presented as the foundational belief in telling the truth in business dealings. The example given is quite simple. If you go to a mechanic or a doctor and they lie to you, or they act without integrity, you simply don't return.
Right, you vote with your feet.
Exactly. That business will ultimately fail because honesty builds trust. And trust is absolutely fundamental to all successful transactions and relationships in the marketplace. This is contrasted with what our sources describe as some other cultures where maybe messing someone over might actually be viewed as a sign of cleverness or even good business acumen. That, they argue, is a foreign concept to the U.S. business culture, precisely because integrity is so deeply embedded in our societal ethics, fostering an environment where fair dealing is expected and rewarded.
Okay, integrity makes sense as a foundation. And then there's service.
And then there's the concept of service, which goes beyond just, worship service on a Sunday. It's about cultivating exceptional customer service every single day of the week in the marketplace.
How so?
Well, our sources argue that we as a culture deeply believe in and reward good customer service. There's an anecdote from one source that paints a vivid picture. Imagine a lavish date night at a restaurant where the server provides such exceptional attentive service that by the end of the meal, you feel like they've become a family member.
Okay, we've all had service like that, hopefully.
Right, and the universal language for thank you in that scenario is money, a big honking tip. This illustrates how, in this culture, customers who are served truly well don't mind paying handsomely for that service. Rabbi Lapin, an Orthodox Jewish rabbi cited in our sources, beautifully articulates this by saying that in the marketplace, when you serve well, your customers give you certificates of appreciation with presidents' faces on them, meaning, of course, money.
That's a great way to put it.
It's the direct reward for value provided.
It's essentially the customer's applause, isn't it? Ken Blanchard's quote perfectly encapsulates this. Profit is the applause your customers give you.
Exactly.
This idea that financial success is a direct result of serving customers with integrity and excellence really highlights these foundational ethics as critical drivers of prosperity.
These values are presented as the very bedrock of American prosperity, and they also explain why people from other cultures, when they come here and adopt these principles, often find remarkable success. But our sources also delve into how we view wealth and possessions from a spiritual or philosophical standpoint, suggesting there are really three possible spirits or approaches to wealth, and that two of them are fundamentally misguided.
Okay, three spirits. Let's dive into those. The first one is the spirit of pride. I can immediately see how this one would be a significant trap for many people.
Yeah, the spirit of pride is characterized by the deeply ingrained belief that money comes from me, like it's the direct result solely of one's own hard work, diligence, and cleverness.
My own grit and genius.
Right. And while hard work is undeniably valued, our sources even quote ancient biblical principles like those that won't work, don't let them eat, emphasizing personal responsibility. The profound danger here lies in taking sole, unshared credit for success.
Like you did it all yourself.
Exactly. It's like a farmer who diligently plants a seed, and when it miraculously rains and the crop flourishes, he arrogantly claims, "Didn't I do good with that rain thing?"
Right, ignoring the rain entirely.
And neglects all the external factors, the opportunities, the circumstances, maybe even the luck that contribute to success. Our sources associate this proud, self-reliant stance with a politically conservative viewpoint, highlighting its inherent dangers of self-sufficiency without gratitude or humility.
Okay, so pride is one wrong spirit. What's the other major misconception about wealth that our sources identify?
That would be the spirit of poverty.
Yo.
This view sees wealth and possessions as inherently evil, tainted, or morally corrupt. The source explicitly calls this a form of Gnosticism.
Gnosticism.
Yeah, in its simplest form, it refers to various ancient belief systems that often held that the material world, including things like money and physical possessions, was inherently flawed or evil, in stark contrast to a higher spiritual good. It's labeled a heresy within a Judeo-Christian context because, as the source points out, Scripture nowhere actually states that wealth itself is evil or that wealthy people cannot get into heaven. It challenges the notion that somehow Jesus' sacrifice could redeem a murderer or a prostitute, but not a successful, wealthy person who has served others well. That, they argue, is simply an absurd and inconsistent theology.
And what kind of beliefs does this spirit of poverty foster in people? What's its practical manifestation?
Well, it fosters deeply limiting and often bitter beliefs like the little man can't get ahead or the deck is perpetually stacked against us.
The victim mentality.
Kind of. The source describes individuals trapped in this mindset as often being bitter, beaten down, and prone to blaming an abstract, vague boogeyman like the corporations for their misfortunes. It dismisses the conspiratorial idea that it's all fixed by the Rockefellers, especially for someone living in, say, Tennessee, where the Rockefellers aren't even present in their daily economic life.
Right.
This spirit, they argue, willfully ignores the remarkable reality in the U.S. that 88% of millionaires are first-generation rich.
88%.
88%, meaning they started with absolutely nothing and built their wealth through hard work and adherence to sound principles. It's a mythology that insists success can only come from the silver spoon.
So the idea that the little man can get ahead is actually a very American phenomenon, according to this perspective, defying the narratives of those stuck in a spirit of poverty.
Absolutely. The author of the source material, having personally lost everything after becoming a millionaire at 26 due to excessive borrowing, then had to start over and become a millionaire twice from nothing. This personal journey deeply informs his perspective that starting from scratch and building wealth is achievable. The spirit of poverty also has what are described as two cousins.
Okay.
Jealousy, which is simply, I want what you have, and then the more destructive emotion of envy, which escalates to, I don't think I can have what you have, so I don't even want you to have it.
Oh, that's dark.
Right. And envy, notably, is cited as one of the 7 deadly sins, underlining its corrosive nature. This spirit, our sources note, is often associated with a politically liberal viewpoint.
And here's the kicker. The source explicitly tells us there are 3 spirits or approaches to wealth, and that 2 are wrong, the spirit of pride and the spirit of poverty, but it only explicitly details these 2 wrong ones. It leaves us, the listener, to ponder what the right spirit might entail. How do you think, based on the other positive principles our sources discuss, we can infer what that missing right spirit might be?
That's an excellent question, and it speaks to the deeper synthesis of these sources. While it's not explicitly defined by name, the context strongly implies, I think, a balanced approach, one that views wealth not as an end in itself, but as a powerful tool for good.
The tool, okay.
Yeah, it's about stewardship, understanding that wealth is a resource to be managed responsibly, with humility, and used for positive impact beyond oneself. The anecdote about a group of Christian men, each with minimum net worths of $500 million, collectively giving billions to kingdom work in a single year, that vividly showcases this potential.
Yeah.
It suggests that true wisdom in wealth isn't about shunning it or claiming sole credit, but perhaps seeing it as a blessing or a responsibility to be stewarded and used generously for beneficial purposes, not just for personal gain, but for the betterment of others. It's about living out those principles of integrity and service we talked about, but at a grander scale, maybe, with gratitude.
That sets us up perfectly for the actionable side of things. building personal wealth. Our sources provide 5 foundational rules for managing money effectively, principles that are presented as universally effective and transformative.
Yeah, these rules, according to the sources, if you follow them with consistency and discipline for a couple of decades, they will yield what they call mind-blowing results 100% of the time.
100%. That's bold.
It's presented with a cause and effect simplicity, almost like planting corn and expecting corn to grow. The principles are that reliable, according to this view.
Okay, then. Let's start with rule number 1. Where do our sources tell us to begin?
Rule number 1, get on a written plan, or what most of us commonly call a budget.
The dreaded B word.
Huh. Yeah, but our sources really emphasize that this isn't just about tracking numbers. It's about shifting your entire relationship with money from passive reaction to intentional control. Winning is an intentional act, they stress.
Okay.
Think about how many people feel like money just happens to them, or they wonder where it went by the end of the month feeling powerless.
Been there.
Right. A budget is the antidote to that feeling of powerlessness. It's actively telling your money what to do before it has a chance to disappear, like intentionally planting a specific crop in a field rather than just letting weeds grow indiscriminately. This act of control isn't just practical. It's foundational to overcoming that spirit of poverty we discussed earlier, where you might feel the deck is stacked against you. It's saying, I am in charge.
That's a crucial shift in mindset. Okay, rule number 2, and this is a classic from our source material. Get out of debt and stay out. Sounds simple, but it's incredibly difficult for many.
Oh, it's a core non-negotiable principle. The ancient adage, the borrower really is slave to the lender, isn't just a metaphor here. It's presented as a deeply personal and liberating experience for the source author, who, as we mentioned, lost everything due to excessive borrowing early in his financial journey.
Right, he learned the hard way.
The profound liberation and power of having no payments in money, once debt was systematically eliminated, is highlighted as the single most impactful financial transformation. It requires learning the magic ancient word called no to impulse purchases or unnecessary liabilities, and having the discipline to forego instant gratification for long-term freedom. The source humorously illustrates this with a caller whose truck payment, $762, was larger than their double-wide house payment, $550.
Wow.
Emphasizing how stuff and the associated debt can truly own you, consuming your income and your financial future. Biblically speaking, according to this source, debt is called stupid. Not a sin necessarily, but simply unwise and a hindrance to true prosperity and freedom.
That's a powerful and relatable example for many people living paycheck to paycheck. So what's rule number 3? It steps away from direct money management, but is equally impactful, they say.
Rule number 3 is about cultivating quality relationships. This might seem less directly financial on the surface, but the correlation is presented as incredibly significant.
How so?
The idea is that your personal income over time will tend to fall within 10–15% of the average income of your 10 closest friends.
Really? That's specific.
Yeah, it's not about judging your friends, but understanding influence. This principle is compared to how responsible parents vet their children's friends to avoid negative influences, like juvenile delinquents or weed heads.
Okay, makes sense.
The reason is profound. Your associations influence your mouth, what you talk about, your attitudes, your mind, how you think about money, risk, opportunity, and even the movies and books you consume, which in turn profoundly affect your habits, aspirations, and ultimately, your financial outcome. Surrounding yourself with financially responsible, ambitious, and positive people inevitably rubs off on you.
That makes a lot of sense. Your environment and your peer group definitely shape your habits and aspirations, often subconsciously. What about rule number 4?
Rule number 4 is save money and invest money. Saving is presented not just as a good habit, but as a sign of deep wisdom, citing ancient scripture. In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has.
Spend everything you make.
Right. This isn't just about emergency funds, though that's crucial. It underscores the undeniable reality that unexpected financial events occur with alarming frequency. Our sources state that 78% of people will experience a major negative financial event in their lifetime.
78%? That's high.
It is. Saving is the essential buffer, the prepared reserve against life's inevitable rainy days, providing peace of mind and resilience. It's about preparedness and prudent management of resources.
And finally, rule number 5.
Rule number 5 is be generous. This principle connects back to quality relationships and that right spirit of wealth we were talking about. It suggests that true generosity fosters a positive cycle of giving and receiving, not just financially, but in terms of well-being and connection.
Sort of completes the circle.
Yes, exactly. It's presented as an easy principle to understand because we all grasp the concept of giving, but hard to implement consistently in practice, especially when personal finances feel tight. The overarching message from these sources is that while these 5 principles are simple in their conception, consistent and disciplined application over decades is what truly transforms your financial life from a struggle to a state of profound peace and prosperity.
So once you have these foundations in place, how do you really supercharge your wealth building? Our sources really underscore the transformative power of early and smart investing. It's not just about saving, it's about making your money work for you in incredibly powerful ways.
Absolutely. The concept of compounding, often called the 8th wonder of the world, is front and center here. Our sources provide a compelling yet astonishing formula. If you invest just $100 a month,
Just $100.
from age 25 to 65 in a decent growth stock mutual fund, assuming a, let's say, conservative 12% average annual growth rate, you'll end up with a staggering $1.176 million.
Wow. Over $1 million from just $100 a month.
Over $1 million.
That's like, for some people, pizza money or the cost of a premium cable bill or a few streaming subscriptions. It makes it so incredibly relatable and actionable. It's not some exclusive club for the wealthy.
Exactly. And the sources point to what they call secret government formulas to wealth in the form of Roth IRAs and 401ks.
Okay, the tax-advantaged accounts?
Right. These are retirement accounts specifically designed to encourage long-term saving and investing. With a Roth IRA, you contribute money after it's already been taxed, but then all your earnings and withdrawals in retirement are completely tax-free, which is why it's called genius.
Tax-free growth, yeah.
It means your entire $1 million gain is truly yours, never to be diminished by future taxes. On the other hand, a 401k, often offered through your employer, allows you to contribute pre-tax dollars directly from your paycheck. This reduces your taxable income now, which can mean a larger take-home pay immediately and allows more capital to compound for you.
So it's like the government is giving you a boost either way.
Pretty much. It's like the government is giving you a powerful head start by letting you invest money that would have otherwise gone to taxes.
The genius here is that you're essentially getting the government to help your money grow faster by either deferring or eliminating taxes. But the real profound power of starting early, regardless of the vehicle, is best illustrated by the classic Ben and Arthur illustration. It's almost counterintuitive how powerful it is.
So this illustration is profoundly impactful, and it's one everyone should understand. Ben starts investing $2,000 a year at age 19
Young?
and stops at age 26. He put in a total of $16,000 over just 8 years. Then he stops contributing entirely.
Just stops cold. Okay.
His friend, Arthur, starts investing at age 27 and diligently puts in $2,000 a year all the way until age 65. He ultimately contributes a total of $78,000, nearly 5 times as much as Ben.
Okay, so Arthur puts in way more money for way longer.
Right. But the shocking truth, at age 65, Ben, who invested far less money for a much shorter period, ends up with significantly more money than Arthur.
Get out.
Ben never gets caught up by Arthur's much larger and longer contributions because Ben's money had so much more time to compound. Those early years made all the difference.
Wow.
This powerfully demonstrates the massive, almost unbelievable advantage of simply starting early. Time truly is your greatest ally in investing.
It really hammers home that time in the market beats timing the market every single time with incredible dividends.
Okay, beyond retirement planning, what about college funding? That's a huge financial hurdle for many families today.
For college funding, the Educational Savings Account, or ESA, is highlighted. It's described as being like a Roth IRA for college because it allows for tax-free growth.
Tax-free again. Nice.
The strategy is straightforward. If you invest just $2,000 a year from a child's birth to age 18, consistently contributing, you can accumulate approximately $126,000 for their education. Crucially, about $90,000 of that total amount will be tax-free growth.
$90,000 tax-free.
Yeah, meaning all those investment gains are yours to use for qualified educational expenses without further taxation. That's a huge benefit, avoiding the tax on all that growth. But the sources also challenge the traditional view of college, sometimes provocatively calling it the worship of the diploma. What's behind that critique?
Well, it's a strong critique of the idea that going into massive debt for a degree is always the best path, or that the diploma itself is the ultimate goal. The true value, our sources argue, is not in the piece of paper, but in knowledge that is applied in the marketplace.
What you can actually do.
Right. It's about what you do with what you learn, not just the credential. With average student loan debt currently around $27,900 and credit card debt often topping $6,000, the advice is clear and emphatic. Pay cash for college whenever possible.
Easier said than done for many.
True. But the point is, the diploma alone doesn't guarantee success. It's the skills, the knowledge, and the work ethic you gain and then apply that truly matters. This perspective encourages exploring trade schools, certifications, or even starting businesses that teach valuable skills without necessarily incurring crippling debt.
Okay, so we've got budgeting, debt elimination, cultivating good relationships, saving, and investing early for retirement and college. What's the next big financial move our sources emphasize after those foundational steps?
Accelerating homeownership. The emphasis is on paying off your house as quickly as humanly possible.
Get rid of the mortgage.
Exactly. For most people, the house payment is their single largest monthly expense, often consuming a significant portion of their income. Once that payment is eliminated, that freed up money, which could be hundreds or even thousands of dollars each month, can be redirected into investments, potentially generating millions over time.
Freeing up cash flow.
The core logic is profound. If you have no payments, you gain absolute control of your income, and your income, unburdened by debt, becomes your most powerful wealth-building tool. It creates immense financial flexibility and peace of mind.
And this leads directly to debunking some popular myths that often keep people trapped in long-term mortgage debt, right? Like the ever-present tax deduction myth.
Oh yeah, that one. This myth suggests it's financially wise to keep a home mortgage just for the tax deduction benefit. However, our sources use concrete numbers to expose the flaw in this thinking. Paying $10,000 in mortgage interest to save, say, $2,500 in taxes is economically unsound.
You're still out $7,500.
You're still losing $7,500 just to get a tax break. A far better alternative, if charitable giving is a goal, is to aggressively pay off the mortgage entirely and then give $10,000 to charity. That would provide the exact same benefit in terms of tax deduction, but crucially, you're no longer paying a dime in interest to the bank. You keep the full $10,000 you would have paid in interest for yourself or for giving.
Okay, that math is pretty clear. What about the borrow to invest myth? That's a common strategy promoted in certain circles, often with complex financial instruments.
It is, and it's largely debunked by our sources. The idea of borrowing at, say, 6.5% to invest at an anticipated 12% seems appealing on the surface, offering a seemingly easy arbitrage.
Make the spread.
Right. However, the sources painstakingly explain that after-tax yield, which might bring your 12% return down to, for example, 9.4% after taxes, makes it far less profitable than it appears, and crucially, introduces immense and unnecessary risk.
Risk is the key.
It's a fundamental error to compare a debt-laden, high-risk investment strategy with a low-risk, guaranteed return like paying off a mortgage or investing without leverage. You're simply not comparing apples to apples when you don't account for risk and taxes.
Another myth that often gets people into trouble is the 30-year mortgage, pay it like a 15-year mortgage strategy. It sounds disciplined, but our sources have a strong take on it.
Yeah, this is highlighted as a widespread form of self-deception. The blunt truth, according to the data our sources cite, is that only 2% of 30-year mortgages are systematically paid off in 15 years or less.
Only 2%. Wow.
Human nature, with its inherent desire for wiggle room and flexibility, tends to prioritize discretionary spending over strict discipline when the obligation isn't hard-coded. A true 15-year mortgage, by contrast, pays off in 15 years or less every time because the payments are contractually higher and force that discipline. It's about building accountability into your financial commitments.
Okay, so what's the practical, disciplined home purchase advice then, given all these debunked myths?
The rock-solid recommendation is to buy a home only after you are completely debt-free, excluding the mortgage itself if you choose to take one, and have a fully funded emergency fund in place.
Get your house in order first.
Exactly. Ideally, if possible, pay cash for your home. That's the ultimate financial power move. If borrowing is necessary, opt for a 15-year fixed-rate mortgage where the total monthly payments, including taxes and insurance, PITI, are no more than 1/4 of your take-home pay.
No more than 25% of take-home. Got it.
This ensures you're not owned by your stuff, that your home is a true asset building wealth, not a perpetual liability. The emphasis across these sources is on learning these straightforward principles and finding counselors who have the heart of a teacher genuinely guiding you, not just a salesperson looking for a commission.
Moving from these incredibly practical personal finance strategies to the broader market, let's turn to some investment legends for their timeless wisdom. Peter Lynch and Warren Buffett have seen it all through decades of market cycles, and they offer some profound insights, starting with how to actually embrace market volatility rather than fear it.
This is truly crucial for any long-term investor. Peter Lynch provides compelling historical data. The stock market experiences a 10% or more correction, on average about every 2 years.
Every 2 years, that often.
That often. He found 50 such declines over a 93-year period. Furthermore, a deeper bear market, defined as a 25% or more decline, occurs approximately every 6 years, with 15 such events in that same 93-year span.
So downturns are just normal.
Exactly. The key takeaway here isn't to try to predict these inevitable downturns, which is a fool's errand, but to expect them. They are a normal, inevitable, and maybe even healthy part of the market cycle, like seasons changing.
And when those downturns happen, it's not a reason to panic, but an incredible opportunity for the prepared investor.
Precisely. Lynch famously states, if you like a stock at $14 and it goes to $6, that's great.
Buy the dip.
Essentially, yeah. For those who truly understand the underlying businesses they own, a significant price drop presents an exceptional buying opportunity, not a cause for alarm. It's like finding your favorite store having a massive sale. This requires deep conviction in your research and, critically, a long-term perspective to ride out the short-term fluctuations.
Warren Buffett echoes this sentiment, but he brings in the powerful element of human nature's role in market cycles.
Oh yeah, Buffett observes that people continually make the exact same mistakes, driven by the timeless, powerful forces of greed and fear.
Greed and fear rule the market.
He uses the vivid example of the housing bubble, which he described as a huge bubble and what is arguably the most important asset for most Americans. When greed takes over, assets become grossly overpriced due to irrational exuberance. But then when fear inevitably sets in, bubbles pop suddenly and violently because everybody wants to leave at one time, creating a cascading panic.
A stampede for the exit.
Exactly. It's a behavioral pattern that repeats throughout financial history, a consistent lesson that human emotions override rational judgment time and time again.
Despite all these challenges and inevitable downturns, both Lynch and Buffett maintain a profound, almost unshakable optimism about the American economy and its long-term trajectory.
Indeed. Buffett notes that despite enduring 2 world wars, the Great Depression, flu epidemics, the Cold War, and the profound societal shifts brought by the atom bomb in the 20th century, the Dow Jones average rose from a mere 66 to 11,497 over that period.
Incredible growth despite everything.
His core belief is simple yet powerful. Nothing can stop America. Lynch similarly points out that the U.S. has an incredible job machine, with millions of businesses starting and creating jobs even when larger corporations are shedding them. This relentless entrepreneurial spirit and adaptive capacity means that, over the long term, stocks will beat the hell out of money markets and bonds, consistently providing superior returns. Their optimism is rooted in the fundamental productive capacity and resilience of the American system.
This long-term optimism is really grounding, especially when the news cycle is full of doom and gloom. So for the individual investor, what are some of the practical, actionable guidelines that these legends offer to invest smartly and confidently? Peter Lynch famously advises, buy what you know.
This is perhaps one of the simplest yet most profoundly powerful pieces of advice in all of investing. It liberates the everyday person from feeling like they need an MBA or a finance degree to pick good stocks.
We don't need to be a Wall Street wisp.
Right. It encourages investors to put their money into companies they genuinely understand. This could be businesses in your own industry, local companies you see thriving, or products and services you use every single day as a discerning consumer. Lynch shares the compelling story of a fireman who became a millionaire by investing a modest $2,000 a year in TAM brands, which was then Tampax.
A fireman? How?
He wasn't a professional investor. He simply observed the Tampax factory expanding in his town, saw a consistently growing demand for the product, and understood the business, intuitively recognizing its value.
So it's like spotting a Walmart opening up in your town early on, recognizing the opportunity based on your own experience as a consumer or a local.
Precisely. Even 10 years after Walmart went public, observant investors who simply understood its business model and growth could have still achieved a 50-fold return.
Wow.
This illustrates that remarkable opportunities aren't just for Wall Street insiders. They're often hidden in plain sight for those who simply pay attention. Warren Buffett reinforces this with his concept of the circle of competence.
The circle of competence sounds like a refined, more strategic version of buy what you know. What does Buffett mean by that?
It is exactly that. Buffett emphasizes that the single most important aspect of successful investing is meticulously defining your circle of competence and then rigorously staying around those
So
spots,
stick to your knitting.
basically. He famously quotes Tom Watson Sr. of IBM, who said, "I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots and I stay around those spots."
Yeah.
For Buffett, investing is fundamentally like assigning yourself the right story, meaning you must be able to personally value the asset, understand its business, its competitive advantages, and its future prospects. If you can't genuinely understand and value it yourself, you simply don't invest.
Stay in your lane.
It's out sticking exclusively to what you truly understand and avoiding the temptation to venture into areas where you lack deep knowledge. This discipline prevents catastrophic mistakes.
Beyond understanding the business itself, what specific financial characteristics should you look for in a company that signals it's a good investment?
Well, a key characteristic, highlighted powerfully by Peter Lynch, is a company with no debt or very little debt.
Low or no debt. Why is that so crucial?
He learned early on, through experience with companies like Kaiser Industries, that it's very hard to go bankrupt if you don't have any debt. Even if a company owns vast, valuable assets, if it's burdened by debt, it becomes incredibly vulnerable to market downturns or interest rate changes. This financial strength provides immense resilience and flexibility, allowing the company to weather economic storms and seize opportunities without the pressure of crippling interest payments.
Makes sense. Freedom from lenders again. And what about how the company is performing in terms of its core operations?
You want to look for companies with rising earnings and dividends. Lynch points out that nearly half the total return from the S&P 500 over a remarkable 50-year period came from dividends alone.
Half the return from dividends, that's huge.
It is not insignificant. A company that consistently raises its dividend year after year is sending a powerful signal. It's not only profitable but also confident in its future earnings and cash flow, sharing that success directly with its shareholders. You want to invest in companies with a clear trajectory of expected earnings growth and, crucially, understand how they plan to achieve and sustain that growth. It's about finding a business that is genuinely thriving and expanding its profitability.
And finally, how do you know if you're paying a fair price for a stock? Valuation is often considered complex, but Peter Lynch simplifies it.
Peter Lynch provides a wonderfully intuitive way to understand the price-to-earnings, or PE ratio. His rule of thumb for a fairly priced stock is that its PE should be roughly equal to its expected annual growth rate over the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, PE equals growth rate, like PEG ratio, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. So, for example, if a company is growing its earnings at 15% per year, a PE of 15 would be considered fair. If the PE is substantially lower than that growth rate, it could signal a bargain you're getting growth cheap. Conversely, a PE substantially higher often means the stock is grossly overpriced and built on unsustainable expectations.
Don't pay too much, even for a good company.
Right. He cites historical examples like Polaroid or EDS, which had PE ratios so astronomically high that even if earnings somehow remained constant, it would take centuries just to break even on the investment. It's a simple metric to gauge whether you're getting value for your money.
So ultimately, with all these insights, it really comes down to patience and a long-term view, right? That seems to be the common thread from these investing legends.
Absolutely. Peter Lynch constantly reminds us that stories rarely change overnight. It can often take years for a truly good company to be fully recognized and appropriately valued by the market. Warren Buffett reiterates that stocks over the long term, and he emphasizes long term, meaning 10, 20, even 30 years, will beat the hell out of money markets and bonds.
Beat the hell out of them, huh? Strong words.
His words. The key isn't to be clever in the short term, but to have the emotional strength, the conviction in your research, and the immense patience to endure market volatility and give your fundamentally good investments the time they need to compound and truly grow. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Now let's pivot to a particularly strong, even visceral stance taken by both Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. Their unified and relentless condemnation of cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin. Munger famously called it dementia, and Buffett labeled it rat poison squared. What's truly behind such incredibly strong language?
Well, the core of their critique lies in one fundamental argument. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are non-productive assets.
Non-productive, what does that mean exactly?
Unlike a farm that yields crops, or a business that generates earnings, or even real estate that provides rent, these assets don't produce anything. Buffett sarcastically describes it as, you stare at it all day and the little bitcoins come out, highlighting its lack of intrinsic generative capacity.
So their value is purely speculative, entirely dependent on someone else's willingness to pay more for it.
Precisely. Their value, they argue, only exists if the next person is going to pay you more
Mm.
than you paid, a concept notoriously known as the greater fool theory.
The greater fool theory, right?
It's directly compared to historical speculative bubbles like the 17th century Dutch tulip mania, where the price of tulip bulbs soared based purely on speculation, only to crash dramatically. In contrast, productive assets like a business or a farm have intrinsic value because they generate income, goods, or services.
Well, they usually do something.
Right. Even gold, often considered a store of value and a traditional alternative asset, is dismissed by Buffett for compounding at a mere 0.10.2% since the time of Christ. And it requires insurance against theft, making it a poor store of value and certainly a poor investment compared to productive stocks over the long haul. The fundamental difference for them is the lack of underlying productive value.
And they also highlight significant negative societal impacts from the rise of cryptocurrencies.
Yes, Charlie Munger in particular points out that Bitcoin is useful to kidnappers and extortionists, and that its success shuffles out billions of dollars to somebody who just invented a new financial product out of thin air.
Ouch.
It's viewed as fundamentally contrary to the interests of civilization because it encourages the illusion of easy wealth gained without much insider work or tangible contribution, which Munger warns against as a dangerous and ultimately unfulfilling path. He advises avoiding crooks, crazies, egomaniacs, and those with resentment or self-pity categories, into which he seems to implicitly place those promoting such speculative, non-productive assets, suggesting a dangerous intersection of questionable character and risky financial instruments.
That's a stark warning, particularly given the widespread enthusiasm around crypto. But let's broaden our lens now beyond individual investments to the larger macroeconomic currents and some critical warnings about global power shifts and the challenges they present.
Yeah, Richard Wolff, a prominent economist in particular, presents a compelling and somewhat sobering argument that the United States is a declining empire, a historical pattern observed repeatedly throughout recorded history.
A declining empire? How does he define that?
Well, the key characteristic of this decline, he states, is that those at the very top, the rich and powerful, systematically offload the burdens and costs of this decline onto the less powerful, particularly the working and middle classes. He uses the poignant example of the British Empire's denial of its own decline, which ultimately led to its humiliating loss in the American Independence War, as a historical parallel for current dynamics.
So how does this offloading or shifting of burdens manifest for the average American, the working class, in practical terms, according to Wolff?
He provides several specific and impactful examples of how the American working class has been progressively squeezed over decades. For instance, he points out that real wages, meaning your purchasing power adjusted for inflation, have largely stagnated since 1978.
Since 1978, that's a long time.
A very long time. Despite significant increases in worker productivity over the same period, driven by advancements like computers and artificial intelligence, the average worker's real take-home pay is no higher now than it was 45 years ago. This creates massive and growing inequality, with the wealth disproportionately accumulating to a small percentage of employers and capital owners rather than being shared broadly with the workers who generated it. That's the argument.
And we've all experienced the relentless impact of inflation on our daily lives. How does that fit into this picture from his perspective?
Inflation, Wolff argues, is another insidious mechanism that directly lowers the standard of living for the working class, making essentials like eggs or gasoline significantly more expensive, and he directly links its impact to political outcomes and social unrest. Furthermore, he highlights the stark reality that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour has not been raised since 2009.
15 years.
15 years ago, making it virtually impossible for someone to live on, let alone thrive, given rising prices. The demonization of unions is also cited by this source as a deliberate method to prevent workers from collectively organizing and negotiating for better deals, further weakening their bargaining power and perpetuating the squeeze.
And globally, there's an undeniable, significant power shift happening with the undeniable rise of China and the expanded BRICS nations. This has huge implications.
This is indeed a major theme of profound geopolitical and economic significance. Wolff asserts that China is rapidly becoming where the wealth is, systematically outcompeting the U.S. in key industrial areas, such as electric vehicles. He cites the stark example of China's BYD rapidly dominating over Tesla, even with a punitive 100% U.S. tariff on Chinese EVs, demonstrating their superior efficiency and scale.
Despite the tariff.
He suggests the U.S. has strategically alienated Europe, making them uniquely likely to cut deals with China, especially economically powerful nations like Germany, further eroding U.S. influence. And the numerical disparity is stark and compelling. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and newly added members, now represent over 40% of the world's GDP and well over 60% of the world's people.
60%.
While the U.S. represents just 4.2% of the global population. This signals, according to this view, a fundamental rearrangement of the world order, where the U.S. could increasingly become an outlier rather than the undisputed global economic hegemon.
And this leads directly to what many economists are now discussing, the potential end of the U.S. dollar's global dominance. This would be a monumental shift.
Yeah, Ray Dalio and Richard Wolff both delve into the historical pattern of reserve currencies being devalued or ultimately destroyed. They explain that the U.S. is currently running very large budget deficits and is actively monetizing debt.
Meaning printing money. Essentially, yeah. The Federal Reserve is creating new money to buy government bonds, effectively printing money to finance government spending. This creates a supply-demand problem for bonds and dilutes the value of the currency. China's rising share of world trade, increasingly conducted in yuan, further threatens the U.S. dollar's long-held reserve currency status.
So other countries are moving away from the dollar.
Many countries, including China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Venezuela, are now actively signing up for an alternative international currency system, likely centered around the Chinese yuan, or a basket of currencies. This structural shift in the global economy is seen by these analysts as a clear and potent sign of a potential fall of empires as global economic power rebalances away from sole U.S. dominance, impacting everything from trade to travel to the cost of goods.
These are pretty sobering predictions and a dramatic picture of global shifts. Beyond the geopolitical shifts, what are some of the other economic warnings and challenges our experts highlight? Well, Ray Dalio warns that central banks worldwide are approaching an end of the power to destimulate the economy, primarily through interest rate cuts and quantitative easing, basically because rates are already near zero or they've already deployed most of their tools.
They're out of ammo.
Pretty much. This means there's an asymmetric risk in a downturn.
Mm-hmm.
They won't have the traditional tools to effectively respond and cushion the blow. Dalio argues that policymakers largely don't adequately understand the big debt cycle, a long-term cycle that had been building for decades and is now reaching its limit.
The big debt cycle.
He describes national debts, including the massive U.S. national debt, as plaque in the circulatory system, stifling economic growth and leading to a death spiral, where countries must borrow simply to pay the interest on existing debt.
Just servicing the debt.
Causing credit spreads to widen and borrowing costs to skyrocket. The U.S. government's interest bill alone is roughly $1 trillion per year, a staggering sum that diverts resources from other productive areas.
So more debt just makes the problem worse, and the solutions for it are running out. And Warren Buffett, despite his overall optimism for America, also points out a profound paradox of progress and growing inequality within the U.S.
Yes. Buffett notes that while the U.S. economy currently delivers an impressive $50,000 GDP per capita, indicating significant overall wealth generation, an awful lot of people aren't living well.
The average doesn't tell the whole story.
Exactly. He highlights the stark reality that inequality is getting wider, with the median income in terms of real purchasing power remaining essentially unchanged since 1989. Despite overall economic growth, the benefits are clearly not being broadly shared, creating a growing divide between the affluent and those struggling to make ends meet, which poses significant societal challenges.
And this inequality, according to psychologist Jordan Peterson, isn't just about economic systems. It's rooted in a more fundamental principle, Price's Law or the Pareto principle. This is a fascinating and often uncomfortable observation.
Yeah, Peterson explains Price's Law, stating that a tiny minority controls the vast majority of wealth or creative output in any creative domain. For instance, in classical music, just 5 composers produced 50% of the entire classical repertoire.
5 composers, half the music. Wow.
He illustrates this with a simple, relatable game of Monopoly. If you play long enough, even starting with equal money, one person will inevitably end up with all the money. This, he argues, is an inevitable consequence of multiple trades conducted randomly over time. It's not necessarily a flaw in the system, but a natural emergent property.
So it's like a natural law of distribution.
Kind of, yeah. And what does this fundamental principle imply about attempts to redistribute wealth or address inequality.
Good question.
Peterson argues that even if resources are redistributed, they tend to flow back towards the top over time, though not always to the exact same people. He notes there's roughly a 10% chance of being in the top 1% for at least 1 year over a lifetime. He issues a strong warning against blaming this inherent phenomenon solely on the oppressive nature of a given system, which he sees as an oversimplification.
So it's not just the system's fault, according to him.
Instead, he identifies massive differences in people's ability, including cognitive differences like IQ, which he illustrates with a simple, poignant example of a client struggling profoundly with a basic task like folding paper as a structural problem that society grapples with. This perspective suggests that while systems can be improved, certain levels of inequality may be an unavoidable consequence of inherent human variability and the dynamics of competitive exchange. It's a challenging view.
Very challenging. Now let's explore technology's dual nature, its immense promises and its potential perils. Whitney Webb, in particular, offers some pointed warnings about AI.
Yes. Webb raises significant and unsettling concerns about the accuracy of AI, pointing to reports that even sophisticated facial recognition technology is often less than 50% accurate.
Well, less than 50%. That's not great.
Not great at all. And this becomes deeply problematic when considering the potential for AI algorithms that choose who lives and who dies, such as in autonomous weapon systems or critical infrastructure control, to be put in charge. Her concern is amplified by documented government corruption in contracting, where the best contractor might not always be chosen, potentially leading to inaccurate or flawed AI systems making life-altering decisions. She implies a profound ethical and safety risk.
He also scrutinizes the influence of big tech figures, particularly those who espouse libertarian ideals, but whose actions might seem to contradict them.
Yeah, she points to figures like Peter Thiel, who famously founded Palantir, a powerful data analytics and surveillance tool used extensively by the CIA and other government agencies, despite Thiel's public self-identification as a Bitcoin maximalist and libertarian.
Seems contradictory.
Similarly, Elon Musk's companies, like SpaceX, rely heavily on substantial government subsidies and lucrative contracts from the military and intelligence communities, raising questions about the consistency of his anti-government stance from her perspective. Webb questions whether Musk's acquisition of Twitter, now X, was truly driven solely by free speech ideals, or if it was also aimed at accumulating a mass of data to train AI on and transforming X into an everything app like China's WeChat.
The everything app.
Which implies vast data accumulation, financial control, and social engineering capabilities. These are the concerns she raises.
And perhaps the most chilling warning she offers is about cognitive diminishment, and even what she refers to as digital slavery.
Right. Webb warns that excessive over-reliance on AI, allowing the genes to perform tasks that challenge our cognitive abilities, can lead to people becoming cognitively diminished, operating on the principle of, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Use it or lose it, yeah.
This, she suggests, is part of what she calls the Kissinger-Schmidt vision, referring to Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt's writings on AI, which implies a future where people might unwittingly serve machines rather than machines serving people. This could potentially lead to a rapid slide toward digital slavery, where human autonomy and critical thinking are surrendered to algorithmic control. It's a stark call to actively choose to remain a creator and critical thinker, rather than passively allowing machines to do everything for you.
It's a stark contrast to Warren Buffett's more general observations about technology.
Indeed. Buffett acknowledges that technology is fundamentally turning the world upside down and exploding, making time and distance less limiting factors in nearly every aspect of life. He notes that the cost of communicating or publishing information globally is approaching zero, which is revolutionary for commerce and interaction. However, while he doesn't delve into the specific societal perils raised by Webb, his perspective is generally more on technology's role in increasing overall productivity, reducing costs, and fundamentally changing how we interact and conduct business. He often has a positive outlook on its broad economic impact, rather than focusing on its potential for societal control or cognitive decline.
Bringing it back to personal responsibility and societal structure, Warren Buffett offers a profoundly insightful thought experiment he calls the ovarian lottery.
Ah, yes, the ovarian lottery. This thought experiment asks you to imagine a world where you could design all of its economic and social rules before you were born.
Okay, blank slate design.
Right. The catch is, you wouldn't know anything about who you'll be. Your race, your gender, your IQ, your physical abilities, or even where you'll be born. Will it be the U.S. or a developing nation like Bangladesh? You have no idea. Not knowing which ball you'll pull from the barrel that represents every human being in the world, what kind of economic and social system would you create?
That's a powerful framing. And what kind of system does he suggest you would, as a rational, self-interested, but also compassionate individual, design?
He suggests you would certainly want a system that maximizes overall output, producing lots of goods and services efficiently, a system that continually increases prosperity for the collective. But crucially, beyond that, you would also want a system that eliminates fear from everybody's life. Fear of old age, fear of illness, fear of financial ruin, fear of being left behind.
Basic security.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly, you'd want a system that takes care of the people that don't survive so well in that market system, which is designed to maximize output. It's about creating a safety net and ensuring a basic standard of well-being for all, regardless of the ball they pull in the ovarian lottery.
So it's about a fundamental balance between maximizing productivity and ensuring robust social safety nets, and a baseline of collective well-being. And how does the U.S. measure up to this profound ideal, in Buffett's view?
Well, Buffett believes the U.S. comes closer to equality of opportunity than any major country in the world, suggesting it is a uniquely dynamic system where individuals, regardless of their starting point, have the chance to succeed. A first-class public school system, he stresses, is vital to maintaining this equality of opportunity.
Education as the great equalizer.
Ensuring that opportunity isn't segregated by wealth, and that every child, regardless of their background, has a chance to realize their full potential. This, for him, is one of the most important things for America to maintain for its long-term health and prosperity.
What an incredible journey we've taken through the multifaceted world of wealth, investment, and economic cycles. We started by redefining our perception of being rich on a global scale, delved into the profound cultural and personal foundations of wealth, as emphasized by concepts like integrity and service. We then moved into the deeply actionable personal discipline of budgeting, getting out of debt, and the incredible power of early and smart investing, as highlighted by Dave Ramsey, Peter Lynch, and Warren Buffett.
The practical stuff.
And finally, we broadened our view to the profound, often challenging shifts in global economics and the double-edged sword of technology, as detailed by Richard Wolff, Ray Dalio, Jordan Peterson, and Whitney Webb, all capped by Warren Buffett's compelling ovarian lottery thought experiment.
We've seen how individual financial choices are just, well, inextricably intertwined with these larger economic and societal forces. From understanding why compound interest is truly a secret government formula for wealth, to the stark warnings about declining empires, the inherent nature of non-productive assets like Bitcoin, the insights gleaned from these diverse sources are remarkably rich and varied.
Yeah.
The goal has been to provide you with not just facts, but maybe a framework for understanding your own place within these dynamic currents.
So as you reflect on this deep dive, maybe consider this provocative thought. In a world facing potential empire decline, currency debasement, and rising inequality trends highlighted by experts like Dalio and Wolff, how can you best adapt your personal financial approach, as outlined by Ramsey and Lynch, while simultaneously critically engaging with the profound societal implications of wealth and technology?
It's a big question.
It really is. Is personal wealth truly separable from the collective well-being, or does Warren Buffett's ovarian lottery imply a greater, perhaps inescapable, responsibility for how we view, accumulate, and utilize our resources within the broader societal context?
Something to chew on.
Definitely. Keep learning, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep applying these insights, not just in your own financial life, but in understanding and responding to the broader trajectory of the economy and society around you.